Back in December of 2015, I stayed up an entire night creating and shaping a couple of guys for the sole purpose of being in love. See, around this time, I had already planned that Lucaya, my most popular OC ship, was not going to ever become official, and I wouldn't off Papaya for another year. But I had a general idea that he doesn't get a great ending, so any ship art that I draw of Lucaya would most likely not ever be canon, which is fine, but man, my heart really did be hurting. So I needed a couple who was not only head over heels for each other, but one who canonly gets together and has a happy ending. And while yes, I could have just drawn ship art for a show I like, I wanted more babies. So listen, I love making OCs, but I do try to limit myself since I just have a lot and I feel really guilty for not giving all of them equal attention. The fact that I created Mace and Jules in 2015 and I haven't made a video on their relationship until now, so about 7 years later, that just shows you how much I suck. They literally are so blessed and they end up spending the rest of their lives together, and yet I'm over here like, haha, look at Lucaya, sucks to suck, right? Like, whatever, you know, I don't understand what's up with that. But any hoozles, as I was saying. So JACE was born at like 3 a.m. on a random December night while I listened to Out of My League on repeat. How they met. So, Mace and Jules didn't meet until they were in college, but depending on who you ask, it's gonna be a different story. Jules met Mace in one of the quads by the art building in college, like I just said. One of the assignments his art class was just given was to get completely out of their comfort zone. Jules' specialty was working with watercolors, and he mainly focused on painting beautiful scenic views. He especially loves woodsy and mountain environments. So to get out of his comfort zone, he decided he would try to illustrate a person because he doesn't ever illustrate people. And he wanted to try a different medium, something with a more limited color palette since he really enjoys colors. He decided he would most likely use charcoal since he did enjoy using them when he had to, and he would really like to improve using them. Turns out though, he would also struggle to find a model that fit this type of aesthetic that he normally wouldn't care to illustrate. No offense to whoever decides to be this model, but he usually wouldn't draw you, so there we go. Enter Mace, who just happened to overhear Jules ranting to his best friend / roommate about the struggle, and decided to barge into their conversation to offer himself. And when I say just happened, I actually meant that Mace saw Jules from across the quad, and his brain was immediately like, I have to have him. And so he brute forced his way through a few mindless college students to get to him. Jules shut him down immediately, which Mace did not see coming at all, weirdly enough. Luckily for him though, Jules' currently unnamed friend convinced him to reconsider. Mace was a fairly popular guy in town and was practically famous online for his guitar covers, and so his friend was not going to let him blow this opportunity. Cause who knows, maybe Mace could introduce them to some actually famous people, or maybe he could get them into some sick parties full of hot famous people. So, you know, just there are so many opportunities. There are so many opportunities here. Jules, get with it. Even though Mace's ego was a bit bruised from Jules' instant rejection, he was still happy he was getting a chance at all. Fast forward a few days and Mace is in Jules' apartment, sitting at the window and mindlessly strumming his guitar. He was only wearing a white t-shirt and gray sweatpants for ultimate comfort. And this was not at all Jules' vision. But Mace insisted that it made the piece more genuine, since Jules' whole concept idea was like someone enjoying absolute bliss indoors. Actually, Jules' original idea was more aiming towards like someone enjoying absolute comfort indoors, but Mace somehow changed that. He has a way with words. And either way, at the end of the day, it still wasn't something Jules would ever illustrate, so it totally works out for this project. Mace's absolute favorite thing in the whole entire world is when he stays home on Sundays, possibly sober, possibly high, and mindlessly plays his guitar while in his PJs. It's his me time, as he calls it, And honestly, who is Jules to reject Mace's me time, especially after his extensive 5-minute rant on its importance to his mental well-being? So Mace and Jules are talking the entire time Jules is working on this portrait. They clicked almost immediately. Their conversations were very natural, and Mace did notice that Jules does jab back at him. What I mean by that is Mace is naturally kind of a teasy person. He kind of likes to annoy people because he likes to see their reactions. It's very amusing to him, and he's naturally just a bit of a goofy guy. He doesn't take life very seriously, right? Mace learned pretty quickly that somebody's reaction to being provoked really helps him determine whether or not they're gonna get along, whether or not they can kind of handle Mace poking fun at him. But he also doesn't just take it and will give it back to him. And Mace is really happy about that. He thinks it's fun, and it becomes this kind of like flirty thing between them, which Mace is super happy about. The entire time Mace is thinking this though, he's really irking Jules. Is that how you say it? Jules can't help but be irked every time Mace flashes his stupid grin at his roommate every time they pass by. Mace says it's because they are staring at him, and he explains this very nonchalantly, like, yes, I'm doing this because they're staring, and this is a natural response that most people do, but something about the way he does it is just different. And Jules isn't exactly sure why it bothers him so much, but he tries not to say anything else because it's really not a big deal, and everybody's an adult here, so if he wants to be a little flirty, he can, you know? He ends up taking a longer time on the portrait than he originally planned, but he finally finishes it and then is immediately confronted by Mace about the payment, which, to be fair, he did model for Jules for hours on his day off, so it wasn't necessarily unjustified. But at the same time, he is the one who volunteered to model for Jules in the first place, so does he really get to ask for payment? Jules is super worried considering that he doesn't have a lot of money, and not to mention Mace is apparently a big deal, so he's probably gonna ask for a higher pay. Jules is just silently standing there, totally freaking out in his own head and overthinking everything, and Mace is losing his own mind because this is really funny and amusing and cute. Turns out he was totally joking and was just trying to smoothly ask Jules to go grab a bite with him. He said that he doesn't like to eat alone, and so it's the very least Jules could do to repay him. That's what he said. So cut forward to Jules and Mace having dinner together at this unassuming diner, both of them in their PJs, late at night. Jules doesn't get why, but it was just really easy to talk to Mace. They talked almost non-stop during the entire portrait, and now an hour into dinner, they're still going pretty strong. To be fair, Mace did have to carry the conversation a few times, but even so, it was really nice. It was as if they had known each other for like way longer than just a week. And when Jules jokingly said this to Mace, he was reminded that, yeah, they have actually known each other for longer than that. Turns out that Jules and Mace were in the same class a few semesters ago, and they even worked on the final group project together. Mace remembered this very vividly, but Jules had no memory of this, not a single one. Mace has to clumsily fill in Jules' memory of this class, but he's also trying very hard to not be offended. People don't usually forget him, whether or not it's for a good reason depends on the person. And yeah, it doesn't take long for Jules to remember the whole situation, but when he does, he can't stop himself from exclaiming, "Oh, you're the asshole who ditched us!" I can't act! He totally remembers Mace now. That's right. Mace had a couple of people in the group do his part of the project for him. Jules didn't get why they so readily agreed to do his work, but he remembered being super annoyed by it. But hey, as long as everything gets done in time, it's fine. At least that's what he told himself. And Mace didn't want to be like completely useless, so he insisted that he'll do the entire presentation by himself. And since no one else wanted to present in front of the class, the entire group agreed to this idea. Even Jules was pretty relieved, considering that he hates public speaking, but he thought Mace would at least be somewhat present during the project itself. And while most of the work could be done on your own, the group still met up a couple times to update each other on their progress and to try to make things fit together and to offer each other hope. Actually, this group did pretty well. They worked pretty well together. It was not bad. Mace had only shown up to the first meeting though in order to assign his part to the couple of other group members, but after that he was practically never heard from again. He also took hours to respond to any text that they sent him, if he decided to respond at all. He even started to occasionally skip class, making it very hard to reach him. And although everyone did try their best to get their work to Mace as soon as they were finished, most of them weren't able to give him their final piece until the morning it was due. Mace was never angry about it though, because he knew he had no right to be. And besides, he only needed an hour to prepare anyways, and that's exactly how much time he had, so lucky him. Mace started insisting that they try to be the very last group to present, just, you know, to save the best for last. And Jules just assumed that Mace was trying to buy more time to put together his presentation. But either way, as usual, Mace did get his way and was able to convince the professor to have them present last. Jules had no idea how Mace could have so much confidence, and it started to annoy him a little bit. It wasn't until a few lines into Mace's presentation when Jules realized that none of it was blind confidence. None of it. It was all real and it was all there. Mace absolutely came through and nailed the entire presentation. Even though he was pretty much just reciting everybody else's work, he was overflowing with charisma and not a single person could take their eyes off of him. Even Jules, who had a very hard time not being completely engrossed in this guy's performance. In the end, they all got a really high grade and Mace pulled through on his part, so it's not like Jules could be too upset. He was still, though, a bit bitter that Mace never showed up to any of their group meetings and did absolutely no research, and yet he gets a lot of the credit because he was the face up in front of the class. But hey, whatever. Jules told himself to not waste his time thinking about it. I mean, you know, they got a good grade, the class is over, let's just move on to other things right now. And eventually, with time, it worked, and he just kind of forgot that it ever happened, and now we're here. It leads us all back to this. Jules apologizing profusely for calling Mace an asshole right to his face as he's being treated to dinner, right after using him for his new art project. Mace does a pretty good job, though, of just joking it off, and he even helps Jules calm down from his little freak out about it, but the energy of the dinner just could not fully recover. The drive back to Jules' apartment wasn't much better either, but you can bet Mace did his damnedest to get things back on track. He was usually pretty good at fixing social situations like these, but his own anxiety was beating his ass the entire time, and so things did remain a bit awkward. When Mace got back to his own place, his cousin Yolanda was waiting up for him at their table so that she could get the entire story immediately. She had already known that she was going to hear the whole story at some point, especially since Mace took so long to finally talk to this guy. But when Mace texted her about an hour ago saying he called me an asshole with a little frowny face and a broken heart, Yolanda knew that she had to wait up for him because she needed to hear everything right now. And he did not disappoint. The moment Mace came into the apartment, he took a few hits and told her everything. He even reenacted a few moments too, like the super fun time that the guy he's been crushing on for a long time, calling him an asshole point blank, right to his face. That was a super fun time. That was his favorite time. His feelings aren't hurt. Yolanda, what? Stop laughing. In the morning, Mace is able to swallow his pride, his anxiety, and other bad feelings, and he goes ahead and texts Jules. He wants to make sure that he gave Jules enough time to think about the previous night and to kind of sort out his feelings on everything. It's not like the night ended horribly either, but you know, it wasn't the greatest ending. It wasn't how Mace envisioned the night ending, but hey, that's okay. That's life. It's a brand new day though, and surely things won't be so weird now. And judging by how fast Jules replies to Mace, along with the emojis he uses, Mace comes to the conclusion that Jules is definitely in a way better mood today. Mace could not come up with a single reason as to why Jules would not want to go out with him again. I mean, they clicked really well. They literally just made so much sense, and there was no reason why Jules also wouldn't see that. Oh, never mind, he was absolutely rejected. Well, I got way too into that story, so I'm just not gonna talk about anything else, actually. Sorry. I hope you liked the picture that I was working on. It takes place a couple of months after they met. Jules realizes that he can't stop thinking about that really annoying hot guy that he texts sometimes. And it's not like there's any deep meaning behind it either. Mace is just really good at sticking in people's heads. So, you know, he's not gonna overthink it. Like this video if you want to give it a like, and if you're interested in hearing more about these guys, please let me know as well. Sorry I didn't really talk about much. Bye-bye.